Dear friend, I am writing this as a letter the way some people write prayers. Not because I expect an answer, but because putting words in order stops my mind from collapsing into noise. If you read to the end, please understand that every name here is a mask, and every scene is true in the way bruises are true. Before I married my husband, Adrian Locke, there had been a girl who pursued him for 5 stubborn years. Vivian Tang loved him in public, with the kind of sincerity that leaves no place for the other person to breathe. She sent books with notes in the margins, waited outside his studio with coffee, photographed him when he wasn't looking, and once confessed with a trembling smile in front of his friends, as if their witness could turn refusal into consent. Adrian never flinched. He told her no, the way a locked door tells rain no firm, unromantic final. Then he met me, and I became the woman he chose with the quiet certainty that made everyone call it fate. People said he loved me at first sight. I believed them because it was easier than admitting I had been chosen for reasons I could not see. The first year of marriage was gentle. We lived in a small place above a bakery, and I still had my own life. Sketches on my desk, freelance drafts, the promise that I would apply for a scholarship abroad when things settled. Then I became pregnant, and when things settle, became a moving horizon. We moved into his mother's house because she said it would help, because Adrian's career at the Westbridge Museum was rising fast, because the word family sounded like safety. I stopped working. I started counting diapers. I measured my days by how long our daughter, Isla, could stay asleep, and how quickly my mother-in-law could find a new flaw to correct. By the time Isla turned 1, my body no longer felt like mine. I was heavier than I had ever been, soft where I used to be sharp, and I learned to dress for invisibility. Loose fabric, dark colors, flat shoes that made no noise. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself love meant patience. I told myself a lot of things, so I wouldn't have to name the loneliness that began living in my chest. Vivian returned in our 3rd year of marriage. The announcement came like gossip always does, in a friend's voice that pretends to be casual while aiming for the sore spot. She had been overseas. Now she was an internationally published photojournalist, a woman whose images lived on glossy covers and in award catalogs. She arrived with an aura that made other people straighten their backs around her. The first time Adrian mentioned it, I was kneeling on the nursery rug, fastening Isla's onesie. Tomas is hosting a welcome party, he said while fastening his cufflinks. Vivian's back. It'll be loud. He hesitated, then performed courtesy. Do you want to come? I don't know why my mouth betrayed me. Maybe I was tired of being a rumor in my own marriage. Maybe I wanted to see the threat instead of imagining it. Yes, I heard myself say, and Adrian's hand stilled for half a beat. His face changed so fast I almost thought I imagined it surprise, irritation, then the smooth mask of a man trained to keep appearances. All right, he said. I'll wait downstairs. I spent 40 minutes trying to style my hair into something intentional, and in the end I tied it back because Isla was grabbing at it with sticky fingers. I put on the blazer that used to fit, and now pulled at my shoulders like a reminder. In the mirror, my cheeks looked rounder, my eyes tired, my mouth too practiced at smiling. I carried Isla into the private room on my hip, and the laughter inside paused the way music pauses when a needle jumps. 20 faces turned toward me, curiosity, calculation, pity, and a few thin smiles sharp enough to cut. In the center sat Vivian, long hair loose, a cigarette balanced between elegant fingers as if the smoke were an accessory. She looked up slowly, as if she had all the time in the world, and her gaze landed on Adrian first. Adrian, she said, the name bright on her tongue. It's been a long time. He smiled the museum director smile warm enough to be polite, distant enough to be safe, and slid his arm around my shoulder. Vivian, he answered. A friend chuckled. Don't tell me you can't recognize your director's wife. Vivian's eyes flicked to me. A pause. Then she offered a gracious expression that almost fooled the room. Sorry, she said. I didn't realize. She stepped forward, kissed the air beside my cheek. Hello. Her perfume was clean and expensive, like a magazine page. Hello, I said, because politeness was the only weapon I'd been allowed to carry for years. Around us, conversation restarted. Someone joked that Vivian had kept herself for Adrian. The room laughed too loudly. Adrian's voice cut through it like a snapped ruler. Don't talk nonsense. The laughter died. Later, I would remember that moment the way you remember the first crack in a dam. People crowded Vivian, hungry for reflected shine. They asked about the Warzone series that had won her a prize, about the lions she'd photographed at dawn, about the way she had made danger look like art. She told stories with easy humor, tilting her head, letting admiration feed her as naturally as breathing. I sat at the edge of the table and watched her hands. The confidence in the way she held a glass, the way her shoulders stayed relaxed because she did not need to protect herself. My sister-in-law Daisy lounged on a sofa, scrolling her phone, and leaned close enough to whisper, "You used to be pretty, you know. What happened?" She said it as if it were advice. She said it loud enough that the men heard and smirked. Isla squirmed on my lap, whining for milk. I adjusted my blazer, suddenly too aware of my body. Adrian's friend Tomas glanced at me and shrugged. "Daisy's right?" he said with a laugh. "Motherhood really changes women." Adrian's eyes narrowed. He picked up a lighter from the table and flicked it toward Tomas's shoulder hard enough to sting. "Watch your mouth," he said. Tomas raised his hands, grinning. Okay, my bad." The room warmed again, but the warmth didn't reach me. I excused myself and carried Isla toward the hallway, pretending I needed the restroom. On the way back, I paused near the balcony because I could taste panic in my throat. The night air was cold and clean. Behind a half-open door, I heard the voices of men who thought women existed in the background. "She's out of your league now," one said about Vivian. "Adrian, be honest. You ever regret how you cut her off?" Adrian answered with the calm he uses when he refuses donations that come with conditions. "The harsher I was, the better for her. She needed a clean break." "Not even a little sentimental?" "Sentiment would have been cruelty," he replied. "Look at her. She's thriving. That means I didn't ruin her." Another man laughed. "Your wife is hovering tonight. Didn't know she had claws." "If she caught you cheating?" someone joked. "She'd go feral." Their laughter was thick, the kind that tastes like stale alcohol. Adrian's voice turned sharper. "Enough." The word landed like a slammed door. Then, softer, almost weary. "Don't bring it up again." I stood in the dark, unseen, and realized something that should have been obvious. Adrian's self-control was not proof of love. It was proof of discipline. Discipline could be aimed anywhere. I walked back to the table with a smile I borrowed from a stranger and sat down like I had not heard my marriage dissected. At home, the night didn't end. Adrian went straight to the study. His mother sat in the living room with Isla in her arms, face set like a judge. "You're a mother now," she said the moment Adrian disappeared upstairs. "Mothers stay home. Mothers don't drag babies out to parties." She looked at the clock as if time were an accusation. "Isla needs her feeding schedule. Do you want her sick?" Daisy didn't look up from her phone. "That blazer is brave," she murmured. "It makes you look bigger." Isla saw me and began to cry, arms reaching. I swallowed my humiliation and took my daughter upstairs, unbuttoned my blouse, fed her until her body softened with sleep. When she finally drifted off, the housekeeper knocked and entered without waiting. She carried a bowl of oily broth that smelled like fish and metal. "Madam says you must drink it," she recited. "Good for milk." I forced a smile. "I'm nauseous." "Not tonight." The housekeeper's eyes remained flat. "If you don't drink, I will repeat your words to Madam." I had learned the rules. Refusal meant a week of lectures, passive-aggressive comments at meals, and the silent punishment of being treated like an ungrateful outsider. I pinched my nose and drank. The broth was thick, tasteless, and the fat clung to my lips. When the bowl was empty, the housekeeper nodded, as if I'd passed an exam and left. I sat by the window in the quiet, watching streetlights blur through my tears. Around midnight, pain twisted my stomach and woke me. I reached for Adrian out of habit, and found only cold sheets. He was on the balcony. Back to me, cigarette ember winking in the dark. He stared out as if something waited beyond the city. The smoke wrapped him in a haze that made him look distant even inside our home. I wanted to ask if he was thinking about Vivian. I wanted to ask if he had ever looked at me with that kind of silence. Instead, I lay back down and listened to his breathing through the open door, and I hated myself for still wanting comfort from the person who was causing the ache. Life settled into its routine again. But the routine now had a new shadow. Vivian's exhibition moved from rumor to schedule. Adrian began coming home later, carrying folders, speaking in the short, clipped phrases of a man whose head is full of logistics. One evening, as I folded laundry, he said, almost casually, "The museum board approved Vivian's solo show. I'll be busy for a while." I waited for him to say it was just work. Waited for him to say there was nothing to fear. And when he didn't, the words leaked out of me anyway. Why her? My voice sounded too small. You know what she wants. Adrian exhaled, already tired of my concern. She is a major artist, he said. Every institution wants her right now. This is business. His eyes sharpened. When did you become the type of woman who imagines betrayal everywhere? The phrase hit me like a slap, because it carried more disgust than anger. I stared at him, suddenly aware of the stain on my pajama pants from spilled milk, aware of my hair in a messy knot, aware that the woman in front of him was not the woman he had married, but a version of her he had let decay. I tried to steer the conversation to safer ground. You promised, I said quietly, that when Isla turned 2, we'd move out. Just us. Adrian's jaw tightened. Why can't you be content? He asked. My mother helps. Daisy helps. The housekeeper helps. You have everything. All you have to do is feed Isla and play with her. Isn't that what mothers want? I looked down at the laundry in my hands. It's happiness, I said, but it isn't joy. He didn't hear the difference. He stood, switched off the light as if ending a meeting, and said in the dark, Stop speaking badly about my family. They've done nothing to you. After that fight, he bought me diamond earrings, the kind that come in velvet and apology. He transferred money to my parents and told me I should be grateful. He kissed my forehead and murmured, For me, be patient. My mother called, thrilled by the transfer, praising Adrian like a saint. Hold on to him, she warned. Men like that don't come twice. I held the earrings in my palm and felt them like small, cold weights. When people asked, I smiled and said he was thoughtful. Inside, I began to eat, not from hunger, but from desperation for something that could fill the hollow feeling. Sweet, salty, soft, crunchy. I swallowed until my stomach hurt because pain at least was a sensation I could name. Daisy's contempt grew bolder. I'd rather die than become like you, she told her boyfriend on speakerphone one afternoon, laughing. Sitting at home clinging to a man, pretending it's love. I pushed Isla's stroller out of the apartment before my tears could embarrass me. I wandered into the mall because it was bright and anonymous. And that is where I found Adrian and Vivian again. Cameras surrounded them. A banner behind them announced the exhibition title, WILDLIGHT, Vivian Tang. Vivian wore an evening dress, black and sleek, her collarbones sharp. Adrian wore a suit, hands clasped, looking composed and important. A reporter asked, Do you have a moment you'll never forget? Vivian laughed lightly. Once I was about to enter a conflict zone, she said, and someone messaged me, Take care of yourself. Because of that, I paused long enough to avoid an airstrike. Applause burst like fireworks. When it was Adrian's turn, he paused, then said, The night before my wedding. The crowd laughed, assuming it was nerves. Vivian turned her head slowly toward him. Her eyes shone with something that wasn't gratitude. My breath caught because around her throat was a diamond pendant that matched my earrings too perfectly. Not the same design exactly, mine were studs. Hers a drop, but the stones were identical in cut and fire, like pieces of one set sold in 2 boxes. The world tilted. I pushed the stroller away, fast, as if speed could outpace my thoughts. Tomas's friend, Seth Quinn, spotted me near the escalators and blocked my path with the swagger of a man who enjoys other people's discomfort. Running already? He teased. Come say hello. Or does it hurt too much seeing them together? I forced a smile. My daughter needs a nap. He leaned in, lower voice, gleeful. Jealousy is normal. You know, Vivian fits Adrian better. They look like a poster. I felt tears gather, hot and humiliating. Seth's grin faltered. Are you crying? He asked, suddenly uncertain. I brushed at my eyes. Something flew in, I lied, and walked past him without waiting for permission. That night Adrian came home with alcohol on his breath and a scrape on his upper lip. When he leaned down to kiss me, I turned my face away by instinct. What happened to your mouth? I asked. Bit it, he said. Eating. You bit your lip while eating? I pressed, quiet but relentless. His patience snapped. What do you want from me, Nora? He demanded. I've been smiling all day, shaking hands, managing donors. I'm exhausted. I cannot spend my night managing your suspicions, too. He pointed toward the living room. Sleep out there. My voice surprised even me. You sleep out there. He stared as if I had spoken in another language. Then he laughed once, sharp. At the door he paused and said, almost casually, Honestly, The way you are now, I have to force myself." The door slammed. Silence flooded the room. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt something inside me go very still. I picked up my phone because the glow was easier than darkness. An advertisement for jewelry opened with a swipe, and there it was again. The exact set, sold as a promotion, 2 pieces for the price of 1. My stomach rolled. I closed it and found a live stream notification from Vivian. Late night confessions. Her face filled the screen, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. Comments flew by. "Are you in love? Did you drink? Tell us." Vivian smiled as if the attention were a warm bath. "I'm not in love," she purred. "But tonight I'm very happy. A wish I carried for years finally came true." The comment section screamed. Someone wrote, "What wish?" Vivian lifted her glass, then tilted her head with a theatrical innocence. "Fine," she said. "I'll be honest. The craziest thing I ever did was give myself to the man I loved the night before his big day." The chat exploded with shock and heart emojis. "Did he choose you?" someone asked. Vivian's smile changed, darker at the edges. "He rejected me then," she said. "He chose someone else. But tonight," she traced her red lips with a fingertip. "Tonight he told me, with his actions, that he regrets it." Another viewer typed, "But he's married." Vivian laughed softly. "Compete?" she said, amused. "That would insult me. I'm not anyone's other woman. I don't steal. I make people come to me." She leaned closer to the camera, voice silky. "The real talent is making someone kneel, begging, bringing himself to your door." I stared at her, at the confidence, at the cruelty hidden in glamour, and I looked up at my reflection in the darkened window. A woman with hollow eyes, and a house that didn't belong to her. The storm outside broke at the same time something in me broke open. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I simply stood, went to the bathroom, and brushed my teeth slowly, as if preparing for a long day. When I returned, I opened a notes app and typed, Option A, stay and disappear. Option B, leave and rebuild. I stared at the words until they stopped shaking. "Leave," I whispered to myself. But leaving required more than courage. I had no salary, no savings in my name, no friendly in-laws, and the law does not grant custody as a reward for suffering. I thought of Isla. I thought of the way Adrian's mother called her our blood, as if I were a container. I thought of Adrian's polished reputation and Vivian's fame. If I left empty-handed, they could bury me with paperwork and smiles. I needed leverage. I needed proof. I needed a life. The first person to test my new spine was the housekeeper, Mrs. Hale, who walked into my bedroom the next evening without knocking, carrying another bowl of oily soup. "Drink," she commanded. Madam said. My voice came out calm. "No." Mrs. Hale blinked. "Excuse me?" I smiled. "You heard me." Her lips tightened. "Then I will tell Madam." "Please do," I replied. "And while you're there, remind her that her gold earrings went missing last month. I saw you take them." Mrs. Hale's face lost color. "How dare you? Your son is applying for a civil service exam." I continued gently, as if discussing weather. "Background checks are picky. Imagine the headlines. Applicant's mother investigated for theft." The bowl in her hand trembled. "You're lying," she hissed. "Am I?" I tilted my head. "Try me." Mrs. Hale backed out of the room as if I had become a stranger. This time she closed the door quietly. The next day, Adrian's mother scolded me for returning an hour late from the playground. Her voice rose, dramatic and venomous, complaining about her health, about hunger, about how I had no upbringing. She mentioned death again, the way she always did, as if I should be grateful she still existed. I looked her in the eye. "If you hate your life so much," I said, "you're free to change it." She lunged toward me, hand raised. I did not flinch. I threw myself backward, screamed, and hit the carpet with enough force to make it convincing. When she froze in shock, I wailed louder, clutching my head. Daisy ran in, startled. Mrs. Hale appeared in the doorway. Adrian's mother screamed. "She's acting. I didn't even touch her." Mrs. Hale, pale and sweating, swallowed hard and said, "Madam, I saw you hit her." Daisy stared, confused. Adrian's mother turned on the housekeeper with fury. But the moment had passed. The witness existed. The story had direction. When Adrian came home, I was in bed with a bandage around my head, cheeks blanched, eyes wide in practiced fear. Mrs. Hale told him the version that served her survival. Madam was angry. She sighed. She struck Nora. The doctor said concussion risk. Nora must avoid stress. Adrian's face tightened. He sat on the edge of the bed, hand warm on my fingers, guilt moving through him like electricity. In the hallway, his mother screamed, calling me a snake, a liar. Adrian finally snapped at her, voice vibrating with anger. Enough, he said. If you lay a hand on my wife again, I will move her out permanently. His mother's wail rose higher. I listened through the door with an odd calm. For the first time in years, Adrian's love for me, whatever remained of it, became useful. That thought should have made me ashamed. It didn't. Shame is a luxury when you are trying to survive. That night, in a voice small enough to be believable, I asked Adrian if Isla and I could stay elsewhere for a while. He hugged me, murmuring apologies, promising it was temporary, promising he would handle his mother. He rented an apartment across town, clean and modest. I chose the day of the move carefully, when his mother had a luncheon and Daisy was out. Daisy returned at the last moment and sneered. So you finally got your way. Must be nice, living off a man and still complaining. I smiled sweetly. You're right, I said. I should learn from you. A truly independent woman never needs anyone, not even family property. Daisy's smile faltered. She didn't understand the insult until it was too late. In the apartment, the quiet felt unreal. No footsteps outside my door, no lectures at dinner, no bowls of greasy broth shoved into my hands like obedience tests. I put Isla to sleep and sat at the small kitchen table with a cupcake I'd bought on the way home because it was my birthday and no one had asked. I lit one candle, watched it tremble, and whispered, "Happy birthday, Nora." Then I blew it out and felt strangely grateful for the darkness that followed. The next morning I woke early, not because Isla cried, but because my mind did. I opened my laptop and searched for the exam schedule for the city's Public Communications Bureau. The job would be steady, respectable, and most importantly, mine. I printed the syllabus, taped it above the table, and wrote a daily plan beside it. I didn't tell Adrian. He would have laughed or, worse, encouraged me in the indulgent way people encourage children. I needed his underestimation. I also began to treat my body as a project rather than a punishment. I walked with Isla every morning, pushing the stroller through a park until my legs shook. I cooked simple meals, not because I wanted to be worthy of his touch, but because I wanted to feel awake again. When cravings hit like waves, I drank water, chewed gum, made tea, and reminded myself that hunger was temporary and freedom could be permanent. The first week I lost nothing. The second week I lost a pound. The third week I could climb stairs without panting. Progress came in small humiliations and smaller victories. Meanwhile, Adrian drifted in and out of the apartment like a guest. He brought toys for Isla, perfume for me, small gifts meant to keep the peace. He talked about Vivian's exhibition the way a man talks about weather. Unavoidable. Vivian called, he said one night, picking up his keys. She misplaced an earring at the museum office. I'll drop it off. He said it casually, but he watched my face for a reaction. I gave him none. Go, I said. If it's late, you can sleep at your mother's. It's closer to the museum. Adrian stared. It's our first week here, he said slowly. You don't want me to stay? I smiled. Work matters, I said. The muscle in his jaw twitched. Fine, he said, voice flat. When the door closed, I did not cry. I opened a folder on my computer labeled Documents. In it, I saved screenshots. The jewelry promotion, Vivian's live stream clip, every message Adrian sent that referenced meeting her outside work hours. I also requested my own bank statements, my marriage certificate, Isla's documents. I read family law blogs late at night while Isla slept, learning the difference between suspicion and evidence, between anger and strategy. I didn't want revenge as theater. I wanted a clean outcome, custody, financial stability, and a chance to rebuild without their hands on my throat. I began to understand something women rarely say aloud. Leaving is not one decision. It is a sequence of preparations made while you smile through dinner. 2 months later, the woman in my mirror looked like she belonged to herself again. Not thin, not perfect, but present. My eyes were brighter. My shoulders sat higher. I wore a dress that fit instead of hiding. On the night of the exhibition's opening gala, the museum filled with donors and reporters, and the kind of people who only attend art events if there is a chance to be photographed beside wealth. Vivian appeared in a gown the color of midnight water, diamonds at her throat, lips painted to match the promise of danger. Adrian moved through the crowd with practiced grace, shaking hands, smiling, introducing her as our featured artist, while his gaze lingered on her in a way that made my skin crawl. Seth Quinn floated nearby, grinning, enjoying the tension he could sense but didn't understand. I arrived with Isla's nanny, hired secretly with money I saved by cutting expenses because I needed my hands free. People saw me and blinked, confused by my transformation. Daisy whispered to a friend and laughed, and I didn't care. During the speeches, Vivian thanked the museum, thanked Adrian, called him steadfast in a voice that sounded intimate. Then she looked directly at me, raising her glass in a toast that felt like a dare. After the applause, donors clustered around Vivian, and Adrian's mother swooped in, smiling like a predator. "Nora," she said sweetly, "you look much better. See? All you needed was discipline." I nodded as if she had given me a compliment. Adrian stepped beside me, hand at my waist for the cameras. "I've been thinking," he murmured, leaning close. "After this show, we should move. Just us and my mother in a smaller place. Isla is older now. We should have our own life." He said it like a gift, like a correction, like I should be grateful he was finally offering the promise he had withheld until it benefited him. I looked up at him, and the calm in me held steady. "Adrian," I said politely, clearly, "we're getting divorced." For a second he didn't react, because his mind couldn't accept the sound. In the bright hall, laughter continued. Glasses clinked, flashbulbs popped. Then I repeated it, each word a measured step. "We're getting divorced." Adrian's face tightened. "Nora," he whispered, warning, as if I were misbehaving in public. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a neat stack of papers. "I've already signed," I said. "Terms are legal. You can review them." Seth Quinn, ever helpful, took the papers from my hand and held them out to Adrian like a waiter offering a bill. Vivian's smile froze. Her eyes widened with something close to panic, because this was not the script she had written. Adrian stared at the documents, and then at me, and for the first time in years, I watched his control crack. I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned and walked out of the gala, through the doorway, into the night air that smelled like rain. My hands shook only after the doors closed behind me. Later, Adrian tried to explain what happened, as if explanation could reverse time. He would tell anyone who listened that he had assumed he was hallucinating when I asked for divorce, that I had looked too calm, too polite, that he thought it was a dramatic gesture I would retract in the morning. He forgot that drama had never been my style. He forgot that quiet women can still decide. The truth was simpler. He had mistaken my endurance for permission. The night after the gala, he drove to my apartment, knocking until his knuckles reddened. When I opened the door, he looked at me as if he expected to find the old version of me inside, soft, apologetic, eager to repair. "You're serious?" he asked, hoarse. "Yes," I said. "Why?" His eyes flashed with anger that disguised fear. "Is it Vivian? Because I swear—" "Stop," I interrupted. "Don't insult me by pretending this is about one woman. This is about a life where I vanish, and you continue as if I'm furniture." Adrian swallowed. "I love you," he said, and for a moment I believed he believed it. "Then sign," I answered. "If you love me, let me go." He refused. He argued, offered therapy, offered another apartment, offered distance from his mother. "We can fix this," he insisted. The next day I sent him a link to a forum post. It contained photos Adrian had sent me months earlier from a hotel. A blurred mirror selfie, a wrist with a distinctive watch, Vivian's hair on a pillow, a timestamp that matched the night he came home with a bitten lip. The post had tens of thousands of likes within hours. The top comment asked one sharp question. Is the man Adrian Locke, director of the Westbridge Museum, and is the woman Vivian Tang, photojournalist? I texted Adrian. If you answer yes, the affair becomes confirmed. Consider what that does to your career and hers. Then I sent a second message. Do you still want to refuse divorce? Adrian went white because he finally understood. I wasn't begging. I was negotiating. Vivian, meanwhile, went into a rage. She showed up at the museum, screaming that Adrian had promised her something. She cornered him in a gallery office, accusing him of using her, of sleeping with her, and then returning to his wife. "In your eyes, what am I?" she demanded. Adrian stared at her as if seeing the ugliness of his own choices. "You said you wanted one night and nothing else," he snapped, desperate to rewrite her expectation into her fault. Vivian laughed, sharp and broken. "I'm not satisfied," she said. "I never was." She wanted romance. She wanted conquest. She wanted Adrian to kneel. When he refused, she threatened to destroy him. He discovered, too late, that obsession can be a cage for everyone involved. In court, the story unfolded without glamour. Screenshots, timestamps, witness statements. The judge didn't care about poetic regret. The judge cared about stability for Isla. I won primary custody. Adrian agreed to support payments because he had no choice if he wanted to preserve what remained of his reputation. His mother screamed about betrayal until her voice broke. Daisy demanded her share of the family property, and then found out there was no share. Everything had been transferred into Adrian's name years ago, a precaution his mother had called wisdom. Daisy's boyfriend took her money and disappeared. The irony wrote itself. Adrian moved back into his mother's house, smaller now, full of bitterness. Vivian's exhibition was cancelled. The museum board blamed Adrian for the scandal, for poor judgment, for reputational damage, and they fired him with the same calm politeness he once used on Vivian. He told himself he would rebuild and come find me. He clung to that hope like a talisman. But life does not pause for men who finally notice what they destroyed. The final collapse came from a place no one expected. Vivian's own work. Months after the scandal, Seth Quinn, recovering from a car crash that had nearly cost him his sight, released proof out of spite and guilt. He posted contracts, transfer receipts, and raw files showing that Vivian's award-winning African series was not hers. The most celebrated photographs belonged to an 18-year-old local prodigy who had sold usage rights for a small sum because poverty makes artists vulnerable. Vivian had taken the images, built a brand, and called it Vision. The internet, which had once adored her, turned brutal. Sponsors dropped her. Magazines pulled covers. Lawsuits stacked like bricks. Vivian tried to plead, tried to charm, tried to rage, but the evidence stayed cold. Adrian, who had been the exhibition's organizer, was dragged down with her. His former colleagues avoided him in public, as if scandal were contagious. He blamed Vivian, then blamed himself, then blamed me, then returned to blaming himself because there was nowhere else to place the truth. While his world shrank, mine expanded. I passed the first stage of the Communications Bureau exam. I failed an interview and learned to fail without collapsing. I tried again. I studied public policy while Isla colored beside me, her small hand steadying my heart. A year later, I stood in front of cameras as a city spokesperson for a redevelopment program that funded libraries and community art spaces. I wore a dark suit and a small lapel pin. My voice did not shake. On a crowded subway, Adrian saw me on a screen above the seats, an interview replayed on the transit news channel. He watched strangers glance up at my image and smile as if I were someone they trusted. He watched me answer questions with calm authority. He sat very still, surrounded by noise, feeling the sharp quiet of regret. At home, his mother lay ill, exhausted by her own anger. Daisy sprawled on the sofa, heavier now, trapped in the same inertia she once mocked. Adrian scrolled through videos of me late at night because algorithms learned what his heart refused to stop craving. In one clip, young women asked me how to survive the darkest period of life. I said, "You face it. You accept that the person you were won't save you. Then you break what needs breaking and build again with your own hands." Another asked, "What if the cracks remain?" I smiled. "Everything has cracks," I answered. "That's how light gets in." Adrian watched until the screen dimmed. He didn't cry. He simply sat, hands empty, realizing he had mistaken my silence for surrender. And by the time he recognized my strength, it had already walked beyond his reach. That was the moment I understood he had mistaken my silence for surrender, and I kept walking anyway. I should tell you what I did after I walked away from that gala, because some people think leaving is the end, when in truth leaving is the beginning of work. I did not scream or throw plates or beg for closure. I treated my marriage like a problem in a blueprint. Identify load-bearing walls, measure fractures, plan a safe demolition. I met with a lawyer in a cafe and slid my binder across the table. He read quietly, eyebrows lifting once, then said, "You have enough to protect your child." I did not ask for revenge in legal language. I asked for stability, custody, a clear parenting schedule. child support calculated by statute, and a division of marital assets that reflected how many years I had performed unpaid labor while Adrian built a career. When Adrian's lawyers tried to intimidate me with polished threats, "He can afford a long fight. His family has connections. Public scandal will hurt you too," I smiled because they were late. I had already applied for an entry-level communications position with the city's redevelopment office, the kind of job that doesn't sparkle but pays on time. I was studying for the civil service exam at night, memorizing regulations, learning how governance is language in motion. Every morning I exercised. Every afternoon I wrote practice essays. Every evening I put Isla to bed and revised my notes until my eyes stung. I didn't do it to become admirable. I did it because dependence is a leash, and I had finally felt it tighten around my throat. The court process was slow, as courts always are, because bureaucracy moves like an old animal, careful, resistant, indifferent to human urgency. Adrian delayed, then offered sweet compromises, then threatened to fight for custody out of pride rather than love. He sent messages at midnight. "I miss you. I made mistakes. Vivian was nothing," followed by, "Don't ruin my life." The contradiction told me everything I needed to know. When mediation day came, Adrian looked tired, as if the weight he had avoided for years had finally settled on his shoulders. His mother sat beside him, lips pressed thin, eyes sharp with contempt. Daisy arrived late, chewing gum, acting bored. Vivian did not appear. By then, she had learned that public places could turn on her. The mediator, a patient woman with gentle authority, went through the terms. I asked for nothing extravagant. Adrian's mother hissed, "Gold digger." And I looked at her and replied, "No, a mother." That was the first time I saw fear flicker in her face, fear not of me, but of losing control. The final agreement granted me primary custody with generous visitation for Adrian, child support, and a settlement that came not from his family's generosity, but from the law's arithmetic. I signed without trembling. When the papers were stamped, I felt no triumph, only relief, like taking off shoes that had been too tight for too long. Between the divorce and the job offer, there was a season of exhaustion that no montage in a romantic drama would bother to show. Isla caught colds at daycare and brought them home like tiny storms. I studied with a fever more than once, highlighters in hand, repeating policy terms while my head throbbed. Some nights I fell asleep on the desk with my cheek on a stack of practice papers. I learned to treat my body with practical kindness. Food that fueled instead of numbed, walks that turned into jogs, weights that made my arms tremble and my lungs burn in the best way. I had friends who offered slogans, "You deserve better," "Forget him," and I thanked them. But what actually helped was simpler: calendars, budgets, and the quiet satisfaction of crossing off tasks. Adrian tried to reclaim me in intervals. He would show up at the apartment with groceries and the expression of a man auditioning for forgiveness. He would kneel to play with Isla, then look up at me as if fatherhood were leverage. I never denied him time with his child. I only refused to let time with his child buy him back into my life. Vivian, on the other hand, became louder. After the divorce finalized, she called Adrian openly, asking for a real relationship, now that the obstacle was gone. When he refused out of guilt, out of disgust, out of fear, she screamed that she had sacrificed everything for him. She appeared at his door once, perfume sharp enough to taste, eyes glittering with an instability I had once mistaken for passion. Adrian later admitted that was the first time he felt afraid of her, not because she might hurt him, but because he realized she had never loved him as a person. She had loved the story she told herself about winning. The night before my exam results were released, Daisy's boyfriend was arrested for fraud, and Daisy called me crying, not to apologize, but to ask if Adrian could help. I listened, then said, "Ask your brother." The next morning I opened the results page with shaking hands and saw my candidate number on the pass list. I did not shout. I put my palm over my mouth and let the tears come silently, because the victory was private and sacred. In that moment, I understood that I had been waiting for permission my whole life. The permission had never been granted by husbands or mothers-in-law or society. It had always been mine to take. A year later, I was sitting in a small studio with bright lights, while a reporter adjusted her microphone and asked about the city's new campaign to highlight local culture and public space. I wore a simple black blazer, an official pin on my lapel, hair tied back, and I spoke with a steadiness I had earned word by word. The campaign wasn't glamorous. It was policy translated into stories people could understand: why parks matter, why art funding matters, Why Safe Streets Are a Form of Respect. When the segment aired, friends sent messages. You look different. You sound like you. I had become, unexpectedly, a face the city used to represent resilience and civic pride. At a community event, a group of young women approached me, phones in hand, shy and excited. One asked, "Miss Lynn, have you ever had the darkest period of your life?" I nodded. "Yes," another asked. "What did you do?" I considered the question carefully. "I stopped negotiating with the part of me that wanted to disappear," I said. "I accepted that I was broken. Then I rebuilt myself from the pieces. Even if you bloom in mud, you can still bloom." They fell silent, absorbing it. A third girl, bolder, asked, "What if the cracks stay?" I smiled because I had asked myself that in the apartment on my birthday. "Everything has cracks," I told her. "That is where light gets in." I heard later how Adrian watched that broadcast. It was on a subway screen, squeezed between news about traffic and weather. He had been through a year of interviews that led nowhere, because the art world is small and scandal stains. The museum board had removed him after sponsors pulled out and critics wrote essays about ethical leadership. Vivian's collapse had splashed back on him too. He had been the curator who endorsed her, the administrator who built the stage. He told himself he could start over, that he would rise again, that I would forgive him once time softened my anger. But time did not soften me. It sharpened my boundaries. By then, Adrian's mother had suffered a stroke and moved slowly through their apartment like a ghost of authority. Daisy had been given a portion of the settlement money Adrian tried to protect, and she had lost it to the charming boyfriend who had promised her a nightclub and delivered only debt. She spent her days on the couch, heavier than she had ever been, scrolling through short videos, sneering at strangers the way she used to sneer at me. Adrian sat at the edge of his bed and refreshed his feed until the algorithm learned his obsession. If I appeared in the corner of a clip, if my voice passed through a stranger's microphone for 2 seconds, his heart would misfire, as if it had been wired to my presence. One evening, a fan video showed me smiling as I signed a notebook for a student. Someone asked in the comments, "How did she come back from being nothing?" I answered in the video with calm certainty, and Adrian watched until the screen dimmed. He did not cry. He simply sat, hands empty, understanding at last that he had mistaken my quiet for weakness, and that by the time he recognized my strength, it had already walked beyond his reach. With respect and a wish that you never confuse endurance with love, Nora.